I do want to know about this whole national emergency thing and the constitutionality of it. Our constitutional law expert, Byron Henry, is joining us now. He's with a partner in the appellate law section of Sheaf and Stone, L.L.P. in Dallas, Texas. Byron, it's good to have you back on the show, man. How are you?
Great to be with you. I'm doing well. Thanks.
So there have been 56 national emergencies declared by presidents over the years, and 31 of them are still technically in effect, including national emergencies dating back to President Carter and President Bill Clinton. Byron? Byron?
Yes, I'm here.
That was weird. Are we losing all of our phone lines?
I'm still here.
If this is why Rush Limbaugh doesn't take calls. His equipment doesn't work. Hey, Byron, talk to us about the constitutionality and what's required of declaring a national emergency.
Well, the Constitution does not apply to declaring of emergency. That's current law passed by Congress. The real constitutional question here, and something as a constitutional conservative I'm interested in, is the fundamental question of why is Congress delegating so much authority to the president with respect to spending money, declaring martial law, and doing other things under these national emergency acts instead of tackling this stuff themselves. And that's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned about the separation of powers in the structure of the Constitution. As Justice Scalia said, without separation of powers, the Bill of Rights is useless. He said structure is destiny. And so as a conservative, I'm happy that we're going to have border security, and I'm happy that some funding may be found to secure the border, but I'm not happy that there is a truck-sized hole in the delegation of power and spending money between Congress and the president, that a president can choose anything he wants and call it a national emergency and start spending money without congressional permission.
Well, and in fact, Donald Trump himself, as a private citizen, criticized Barack Obama for the use of executive orders and national emergencies in the past numerous times. And some of these national emergencies are understandable. 9/11 was a national emergency. The Iran hostage crisis was a national emergency. All of those declarations are actually still in effect today. Even the one going back to the Iran hostage crisis in 1978-79 under President Carter is still in effect. However, the danger, the precedent being set for essentially a domestic foreign policy issue, a domestic and foreign policy issue like the border wall, is opening the door to future abuse. I'm not classifying this as abuse per se, but it's opening the door for an abuse of power by future presidents.
Well, I mean, it's legal, and it's constitutional because Congress has delegated an awfully broad amount of authority, and I don't think it's probably unlimited, but a lot of authority to the president in a lot of areas, by the way. This is just hot right now, but if you comb the laws, you would see that our regulatory agencies, remember net neutrality? That should have been debated in Congress. It was of national importance. All that authority had been delegated to the FCC, so Commissioner Pai took all the heat whenever net neutrality was in the news and not Congress because they had pushed it all off onto the FCC. So that's just another example of places where Congress doesn't want to do the hard work or the politically unfavorable work to answer these tough questions and then run for election. But certainly the precedent is it's an overreach. Let's put it that way. It's not in good faith when you have a battle with Congress, lose, and then say, King's X, I'm going to go over here and use the money you said I could use anyway because I lost my negotiations with Congress. Is it legal? Probably. Will there be court challenges? Of course. There's a court challenge, depending on where Donald Trump decides to eat dinner. There's a court case filed. So there's going to be a court case filed. The problem is that it's a relationship issue between Congress and the executive has been winning these battles because the executive's been willing to take the heat and go directly to the American people, like President Obama on the DACA issue and other presidents on other issues, because they speak with one voice. Let's face it, it's easier for one president to speak with one voice than 535 members of Congress containing two parties. So the president has the advantage, and Congress is basically pass the buck to the president, and this president decides he's going to use that buck.
It's interesting that you point that out. The executive branch has certainly been able to centralize power over the last 20 years because the main objection job of Congress has become to win re-election. So they don't want to get their hands dirty and get into anything controversial, which is part of the reason why we don't have a budget. We haven't had a budget for 10 years, and our national spending's out of control. $22 trillion in debt right now as a result of a lot of foreign wars and other activity. I get that, but $22 trillion in debt right now, and part of it is because of what Congress is failing to do on a daily basis. And when a national emergency or an executive order is declared, a lot of power is distributed into the various administrations and agencies under the executive branch, and as well as to Congress. And they don't want to give up that power once it's given to them, which is why we still have 31 national emergencies still technically in effect today.
That's right, and people of both parties should be very leery, and the Republicans, conservatives should be leery of supporting President Trump, not because they're not for border security, not before they think that Congress should appropriate more money for the border barrier and border security, but because these structural issues matter for the long haul. These things are what's endure. The border security, the border wall, that's the passing fancy of this cycle. There'll be something else next cycle. But these structural fights between the president and Congress and the courts, those last. Those are enduring. And I don't think conservatives should cheer policy wins that come at the expense of structural foundations of the Constitution any more than they do when President Trump is president or Republican is president, any more than when they decry them when President Obama was the chief executive.
You could be in favor of tougher immigration policies. You could be in favor of border security. You could be in favor of building a wall and still be opposed to a ridiculous precedent being set by President Trump in declaring a national emergency and misappropriating funds. It'll go to court from here. What's the likelihood, based on the current makeup of the Supreme Court, that this will withstand a challenge? And how long is this process going to take now? 3 years? 5 years?
It probably won't take that long because it'll be in the injunctive stage, and that's where the court will render its initial likelihood of success opinion. But that will probably be 6 months. But my point on that is that I think President Trump has the advantage in the courts because the courts are not equipped to disagree or second guess a president's decision on what's a national emergency. I mean, he's got cabinet people, intelligence people, defense people. He's got an entire branch of information from which to draw as to whether or not an emergency exists. And the court has, some papers filed by the House of Representatives and some plaintiffs' advocacy groups saying the president's crazy. So, I mean, the Supreme Court especially, is not going to lightly second-guess a president's declaration of a national emergency and turn that political, because that might set even a worse precedent than just letting the wall get built.
And it's ironic about that. The courts might be reticent to second-guess the president, but the president has absolutely no problem second-guessing his military, his intelligence apparatus, and his own department heads.
That's correct. My advice to President Trump is take the money to build the 55 miles. When the 55 miles is up, revisit this battle in the next budget negotiation. There's some coming up.
He should have taken he was offered more money before this. He should have taken that instead of shutting the government down.
Exactly. So, I mean, this guarantees there's going to be a court case in the news. I'm going to be on the radio, and President Trump is going to be defending himself against the left, which I think he likes. I think he likes to be in that position on the national stage.
He likes playing up to his base.
Yes, I think that's what he enjoys. I think he's comfortable doing that.
Byron, we'll talk soon. Have a great weekend. I'm sure we will have you back on very soon as this court battle continues.
My pleasure. Anytime.